Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started. My name is Craig Kahlke, Team Leader, Cornell Cooperative Extension, Lake Ontario Fruit Program, welcoming you to another virtual LOF Spring Meeting Series via Zoom. We're proud to have sponsorship for today's webinar and Fridays as well, which I will tell you at the end. Valent USA and Valent Biosciences. They are pleased to offer sponsor a webinar, offer a number of plant growth regulator products used at this important stage in the growing season. Maxella is a proven fruit thinning agent at petal fall and the 10-12 millimeter stage. It increases cell division, leading to larger fruit. Use Maxella for hard to thin and small fruited varieties and defruiting one-year-old trees. Valent's NAA-based PGR products include Polmaxa and Fruitone. Both are reliable tools for your thinning program at bloom, petal fall, and the 10 to 12 millimeter stage, and form the basis for a good return bloom program. Finally, Provide can help you reduce the incidence and severity of fruit russet and scarf skin on varieties like Sweet Tango, Gala, Snapdragon, and Golden Delicious when used in a program beginning at petal fall. More information about Valent products can be found at valent.com. And again, we're very appreciative of the sponsorship from Valent. It's been a great partnership with extension support for a long time. With that, I am going to stop sharing my screen and allow Terence to take it away.
Good morning, everybody. It's a real pleasure to be with you. I've got a few slides I want to present to try to set the stage, but I'm really hoping that this will be a discussion and we'll be able to have some good interaction about thinning. To start with, let me just comment that it's just a really interesting year with a very long period between green tip and bloom, then extremely warm temperatures from bloom up until now. The bloom happened very quickly, great bee flight weather, and it's now really, really impressive the amount of bloom that generally was available in most varieties and the amount of initial set. I would also add that I've seen just a tremendous amount of bloom on one-year wood for many varieties, indicative that we had good flower initiation weather all the way in through the late summer of last year. Now, we've got to deal with a complicated situation because in addition to the long period between green tip and bloom, there was a series of frost events that affected some blocks quite severely, others a little bit less so. And now it really is a critical moment to try to determine what your block needs and then react at the appropriate time. I hope to give some practical suggestions as we get through this. But I want to start with this slide that you've all seen many times about the ideas that we push about repeated and sequential applications of thinners guided by various computer models. And starting with some target in mind that you want to get to, and then working down through this protocol until you get very close to that target number. And then stopping. In some years, it might be just a bloom spray and a petal fall spray. In other years, when thinners don't work very well, we have to continually apply all the way up to 18 millimeters, 20 millimeters to try to get the fruit off. But at each step of the process, there is a computer model, starting with the pollen tube growth model to guide blossom thinning, carbon balance model to guide us in dose and planning, and I'll show some data in a minute about how useful that is, and then using the fruit growth rate model to assess. This year it's critical to assess what we've gotten so far from bloom and petal fall and eventually petal fall sprays before we decide what to do at 10 to 12 millimeters. Now I'm going to repeat that about 3 times in this presentation just because it's so critical that we collectively as an industry have some hard numbers on which to base our decisions in about a week from now. I had a meeting a few days ago with the Hudson Valley. They're ready to put on their 10, 12 millimeters, but nobody had any fruit growth measurements, and it's really difficult because of widespread frost damage. It's like flying blind. I got a little carried away and chastised them. I hope not to repeat that, but I really hope there will be a number of people in Western New York that will measure fruits, share the data with me, that we can all work together to try to get this crop thinned right. Now, as you know, at each one of the 4 timings for sprays, there's various chemicals that are available. Today, I'm going to focus on petal fall. And for me, that's typically when fruits are 5 to 6 millimeters. Now, I appreciate the Lake Ontario fruit team yesterday measured fruit diameters all over Western New York, inland and lake sites. And generally, some of the earlier varieties like Ginger Gold and Ida Red were bigger, maybe 8 millimeters, but most of the varieties were between 5 and 6 millimeters. Some were as little as 4. But we're right in that window of 5 to 6 millimeters when a typical petal fall spray would go on. Now, there's several options. The traditional idea was just to use 7 alone. You get a little bit of thinning, helps break up clusters. You get a little bit of insecticide action, especially if you put on the 2-pint rate. And that may be the proper strategy on some blocks that had heavy frost damage, 7 alone. Amethyst is a very traditional thinner at petal fall. It's very safe and works well. More recently, we've pushed the combinations of NA-N7 or Maxellin-7. And for those growers who are trying to grow apples for particular markets that are carbaryl free, we've had good success combining NA and Maxell in the last couple of years, as that marketing push has been pushed by some supermarkets. We look forward to maybe in about a week or a week and a couple of days to be back here in another webinar to talk about the main thinning window of 11, 12, 13 millimeters. We try to not go right at 10 anymore. We tend to go to 11 to 12 millimeters and up to 13 millimeters. About a week after that, if we still can't thin, we'll be back talking about the last opportunity. We call it the rescue sprays at 18, 19 millimeters. And so I won't focus so much on those chemical options right now. I'll focus primarily on the petal fall timing. I want to take just a retrospective look briefly at petal fall, or bloom thinning in 2020. Generally, the pollen tube growth model indicated the first spray of ATS should have gone on in some of the early sites, for example, at Geneva on Friday. For most of the lake fruit region, it was Saturday, and maybe some later sites Sunday. So people that sprayed ATS were generally spraying on Saturday. Their warm temperatures indicated that if you sprayed ATS on Saturday, you should have repeated again on late Sunday or early Monday morning. And so there was some, I hope, many retreated with a second spray either late Sunday or sometime on Monday. We do see some burning of petals from the ATS. There's less leaf damage than I expected. I like to see some leaf damage. It indicates we got a good application of ATS. There's less of that I've seen so far. But what's more troubling, it appears that the ATS sprays have given little thinning. I don't know how to explain it yet. We'll have to wait and look at the data, but it appears maybe that the temperatures are so warm, the pollen tubes just grew extremely fast and possibly fertilized many flowers before we got the sprays on. And so just being a few hours off under these really warm temperatures could have meant the difference between almost all of the kings and many laterals being fertilized versus being able to knock some of them off. Nevertheless, I think there will be some benefit from it, but it's disappointing that we haven't seen more effect so far. Now, that's all I want to say about bloom thinning right now. Let's talk now about the post-bloom thinning options. Despite the frost damage that we saw in some blocks, there appears to be a really strong set for the part of Wayne County that I looked at early this morning. And from what I hear, I haven't been to Orleans County, but from what I hear in quite a bit of Orleans County and to some extent in Niagara County, stronger than I thought despite the frost damage. But based upon what I saw in Wayne County, this petal fall spray becomes a very essential component of thinning programs with 3 provisos. In blocks where you have the kings, or mostly you have the kings, and a strong set, a full dose of either NA-N7 or Maxellin-7 is needed. And I'll talk about how to choose between those 2 options. In blocks where many of the kings are missing, but you still have some kings, and with a strong set of laterals, I can say the same. We need a full dose of either NaN7 or Maxellin-7 to get a good start on this thinning job. But there are going to be some blocks. Now, I didn't see any in Wayne County, but from what I've heard from both Craig and Mario and Janet and others, that there's some blocks with severe damage in Orleans and Niagara County. If the set is only moderate, a pedal fall spray of just 7 alone is still suggested. Now, we'd like to try to time each of the sprays, pedal fall 12 millimeters, and then the rescue spray at 18 millimeters on a new timing method of degree days. It's a degree day with a different base than the entomology ones. This one has a degree day base of 38 degrees. And so it's listed on the Carbohydrate Model website as a column for degree day accumulation since bloom. We like to try to time the pedal fall spray somewhere around 100, maybe to 125. And we'll look at where we're at in the next couple of slides. Before I leave this one though, would like to be ready to go with our main 12 millimeter spray between 200 and 250 degree days. Over the years of an 18-year study we did, almost every year, or at least every year of those 18, the best thinning was achieved when we were in that sweet spot window between 200 and 250 degree days after full bloom. I should just comment, I think also that there is a technical definition of full bloom, and that's the one I try to use to put into the model. It is when you're standing on the north side of the tree, when 80% of all the flowers are open, meaning 4 flowers out of every cluster are open, or if you counted all the flowers, 80% of them are open. That's the exact moment of full bloom. I used to work in an area where some guy would tell me that full bloom happened at 11:29 a.m. on such and such a date. He was that precise. But that date is important that you put into the carbohydrate model so that it can then calculate these degree days since full bloom. So some suggestions for post-bloom thinning for 2020 is the heat that we've had and are experiencing today and tomorrow with then lowering of temperatures means that the carbohydrate model is essential to avoid over-thinning. One of the best uses of the carbohydrate model is to point out days or periods of time with strong negative deficits of carbohydrate that when combined with thinners cause overthinning. There's both a web-based version at the NUA website and a phone app version called Malusim that's available at either the iPhone iTunes store or the Android store. When you have a weekly deficit of less than minus 60, an average, it's a 7-day running average, that's when it's a little more risky to spray. Now, let me comment that behind the carbohydrate model is a very complicated table that takes into account both how close you are to pedal fall versus 10 millimeters and 12 millimeters, and the carbohydrate balance. It turns out that at pedal fall, thinners are very mild. Even when you have deficits, they're still mild. So in 18 years, when we sprayed every pedal fall, regardless of how hot or cold it was, we just sprayed. We had 3 years where it was very warm at pedal fall and it never overthinned, years like this one. Thus, I continue to say there's little risk of overthinning at the pedal fall timing. Fruits just aren't as sensitive. The paper that we published showed a U-shaped curve with less sensitivity to fruits at pedal fall, increasing to maximum sensitivity at 12 millimeters, and then sensitivity declining or falling off when you get to 18 millimeters. So at this timing, I think there's little risk of overthinning despite the 80-degree temperatures that we're having today and tomorrow, and then mid-70s the day after that.
Quick question, Terence, for the degree day 200 to 250, what's the base temperature?
Base 38.
Base 38. Thank you.
So I'm suggesting that you pick a window today, tomorrow, Friday, Saturday, one of those windows where you think you can spray and apply your pedal fall spray. Some of the considerations are your bees out of there? Because you really have to include 7 in this. And if the bees aren't out of there, you have to wait till they're gone. And then we have some likelihood and chance of rain on Thursday and Friday. And I'll say it again later, but I'll say it here as well. We need a period of 8 hours with no rain after a spray to get the thinning effect. So let's talk about the situation in carbohydrates. This is Williamson for today, just run an hour ago, showing in the top the chart of carbohydrate balance all the way from green tip. Now, extremely long period from green tip to bloom, and you can see it was negative, not bad, not really seriously negative, till we got out to about the 25th of April, and then it got a real negative window, not too bad, but up through about May 1st. Then it started to progress positive. Interestingly, we have never cracked zero in 2020. In the Hudson Valley, the curves show a positive period in that May 4th to May 11th window, but not in Western New York. Too much cool weather. But
Terence,
starting
another
on May
question.
11th, yes.
Do we know if the extended period between green tip and bloom will affect carbohydrates and therefore thinning?
Yeah, that's a good question. And let me try to give you the best answer we know, and they say we don't know the full answer. The storage reserves of carbohydrate is what the tree uses from green tip until there are enough leaves out there to support the tree. So the trees have been using up carbohydrate reserves the whole season. Now, this curve shows the 7-day average. There have been a few days that were positive, especially since May 4th, but not a 7-day average. And so the tree has depleted a lot of its reserves. And that's a big concern as we get up through bloom, because it means that flowers could be weaker and may not have the ovule longevity to keep the ovule alive. Now, if you get a cool period during bloom, it takes a long time for the pollen tube to grow. Set would be reduced in a year like this because you've just basically used up all the reserves. But interestingly, over the years, and this is a little study Alan did, once we get to petal fall, the tree is not really dependent on reserves. It's really dependent on day-to-day production. Now, one day of bad production doesn't do much in terms of fruit set, but 2 to 3 days of very negative carbohydrate balance do cause the tree to start shedding some fruits. But once we get to petal fall, the reserve part is sort of immaterial. I would have worried that we might not have had strong flowers, but it turned out that it was so warm during bloom, the pollen tubes just grew extremely fast, and the ovules apparently were still alive. And so we've got really good set because of the kind of weather we had right around bloom, despite a long period between green tip and full bloom. But now that we're past that, I discount all of the effect of the reserves. And the little study that Alan did, he went into little fruitlets that we were shading, causing serious deficit, and measured the amount of starch, which is a storage carbohydrate, and they still had a lot of starch. So the reserves that the tree has aren't readily available to the fruit once we get to the petal fall. They're dependent on what the leaves are producing. But that then leads us to this table. The table below shows from May 23rd, which was Saturday, the kinds of temperatures and radiation that we've had. Now, if you look at the first column, maximum temperature, 76, 82, 84, and today 90. Tomorrow, 85, 78. This is for Williamson. This is the DeMarie Williamson weather station. And then it's predicted to get cooler on the 29th and 30th, on Sunday the 31st, and down into the 60s. Nighttime temperatures were mid-50s, but yesterday 62, today 63, tomorrow 65 and 66. Anytime night temperatures are that high, then there's going to be serious carbohydrate deficits. And that's basically what we're seeing. Starting Saturday deficits, well, the third column is radiation. We've had bright sunshine. Any radiation above 20 megajoules per day is bright. Now, tomorrow it's supposed to be lower and then quite dark on the 28th, which is, what's today, Tuesday? That's Thursday, because probably we're going to get some rain. Now, you combine that deficits starting Saturday were minus 32, minus 27. But when we got the warm nights yesterday and today, it's pushing deficits up into the minus 50, and then minus 83. And then the dark day of the 28th is going to push deficit daily to minus 95. That's a serious deficit. So those 2 days combined of minus 83 and minus 95 will probably induce some natural fruit drop. Often we don't fully appreciate that Mother Nature gives us thinning by just imposing these dark, cloudy days with warm temperatures. And over the years, whenever we've had that, we see natural drop. Now, that's most pronounced when this happens at the 12 millimeter, because that's the time when the fruits are bigger and they're demanding a lot of carbon. Right now, at petal fall, they're still really little, and their demand for carbon is low. So these kind of deficits at petal fall have never given serious drop. They do increase natural drop a little bit, but they are beneficial when we try to apply chemical thinners at petal fall to give us excellent thinning. So we're looking at an opportunity, I think, to utilize deficits today, tomorrow, and the day after to achieve thinning where we need serious thinning. Now, the last column is the degree day accumulator, and it shows that today we're at about 70 degree days. We'll be at 90. By the end of the day tomorrow, we'll be in the sweet spot of 100 on Thursday and Friday and Saturday. So sometime between Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, are wonderful times to put on a petal fall spray. I just, for interest, ran the same model for west of Rochester for people there to see how different it is. It's basically the same. I put in full bloom date of Saturday for this case, and you see temperatures not quite as high, not getting up to 90, but nighttime temperatures the same in the 60s from yesterday all the way through Thursday night. That's giving daily deficits on tomorrow and Thursday of minus 95, and the average is of minus 50 to minus 45. Now, since the 7-day average never gets to minus 60, the model doesn't tell you to be afraid of thinning. It tells you go ahead, because the model knows that we're still at petal fall. You can see that in the Orleans County, we're going to get to that magic 100 degree day. It's not magic, but just my suggested window, sometime day after tomorrow. But the model is still telling you to apply standard rates for petal fall, because petal fall is a safe timing, and we need thinning in blocks that set up really heavy. So let me go over
questions.
Yes. Go ahead.
First one, is there any issues with spraying at night to avoid pollinator issues, or is there a need for sunlight?
There's no need for sunlight, and you can spray at night to avoid killing bees. The beekeepers would kill us to hear us talk like this. But the XLR version of 7 has a much finer grind than the powder, and therefore it's much less available for bees to pick up. The problem with wettable powder is some of those granules are deposited on the leaf, and they pick them up like pollen grains and take them back to the hive and kill a lot of bees. So best get the bees out. If that's not possible, wait. And if that's not possible, spray at night and use 7XLR.
Thanks. We got one more. We have 2 to 5 inches of shoot growth. Do we have sufficient time to apply apogee without negatively affecting petal fall thinning?
Yes. The petal fall, even if you applied apogee today, the petal fall thinning will still have its impact with that, because the apogee takes a while to have it start having its impact. But it will impact the 12 millimeter spray. But that's just a fact of life. And that's one of the reasons I want people to go forward with a petal fall spray, because if you're going to be spraying apogee to control shoot growth, we can get the max we can get out of this one, because the 12 millimeter, who knows what temperatures we'll have, and the apogee will negate to some extent the thinner action.
Thank you. That's it for the questions for now.
Okay, so let me give you sort of a summary. I think the best timing for petal fall sprays is between Thursday, May 28th and Saturday, May 30th. Now, Thursday and Friday, you have temperatures in the mid 80s, temperatures at night above 60, with daily deficits of -90 and a 7-day average of -40. And that's perhaps the best days to thin if you want aggressive thinning. And you have, like, I saw gala blocks in Wayne County that just are unbelievable. However, there's some rain forecasted for both Thursday afternoon and Friday afternoon. That complicates things. I hate to get a call saying, I applied my thinner 2 hours ago, now it's raining. Now what do I do? It's very difficult to know what to do when you've got some uptake of thinner, but then you're washing it off. So I'd love to have 8 hours between application of any thinner and any rain. Now, we do continue to get uptake of thinners for full 24 hours after application, but 90% of it's in the first 8 hours. And so I'm happy if we can get 8 hours before any rain. And if you do get rain, call me. I'll try to give you my best idea, but it's very difficult if you get rain right after you put on thinners. Now, Saturday, with temperatures lower in the mid-70s and daily deficits of lesser, just -40, not as bad, is perhaps the best day to thin if you need mild thinning because you had a lot of damage. But with either the Thursday, Friday, or with the Saturday timing, I think you should spray normal rates at petal fall because it's a very safe time to thin. Now, I love the traditional thing that works really well is 7.5 parts or 3 ounces of NA and a pint of 7 on things like Honeycrisp, Gala, Snapdragon. And I put in parentheses there, mature Snapdragon, because there's many young blocks. As a young block, we find Snapdragon thins easier, and I would put on only 5 parts. But as Snapdragon gets 5 years or older, it thins harder. And the bloom I've seen on Snapdragon, it needs it. Now, for more traditional varieties like Macintosh, 5 parts of NA plus a pint is enough. With Cortland's, I don't like 7, just 5 parts of NA. But I want to comment on this Maxell and 7 combination. Over the 18-year study, we sprayed Maxell and 7 every year, just like NA and 7 on different trees. In years when it was cool, we got almost nothing out of a petal fall Maxell and 7. But in warm years like this, we got really nice thinning and a big boost in fruit size. So I think this is, of any of the years, this is the year, especially if you spray on Thursday or Friday, when you'll get a good bang for your buck with Maxell and 7. I want to emphasize the dose. What I'm suggesting is 64 ounces of Maxell per dilute tree roll volume. So full tall spindle that's fully grown is around 200-gallon dilute tree roll volume. We're going to put 64 ounces in for every 100. So basically that's double that. We're putting in 128 ounces or 1 gallon to the acre. Now, I don't care if you spray 50 gallons, 100 gallons, 150 gallons, or 200 gallons. You got to get the full gallon to the acre. So my rate is a rate per 100 dilute. But basically, you got to double that on a two-year-old or a fully mature orchard. Then the question is, you put in 1 pint or 2 pints of 7. The 2-pint rate doesn't thin any better unless you get a little re-wetting. Now, if you're looking at a very strong set on Gala, I'd put in the 2-pint rate and hope you get a little bit of rain on that to re-wet the 7 and get a little more thinning. Remember that petal fall is safe. There's not a really small chance of over thinning. So even though it's warm, I don't worry. Now, if things worked out well and you needed a lot of thinning and you thinned on Thursday or Friday and you could avoid the rain and then get a little re-wetting of the 7, it's possible between what you did at bloom and petal fall to have near perfect thinning in 2020. That happened to us in 3 years out of the 18-year study that I talked about. So there is really an opportunity. Now I go back to the issue that kings are missing in some places. I still think you should go forward with a petal fall spray. You can judge if a lot of kings are missing, whether you want to be a little less aggressive and thin on Saturday, or you want to be more aggressive on Thursday and Friday. But regardless, because of the damage we had to kings, we have to find out how many fruits we still have alive and growing after this petal fall spray. That's where measuring fruitlet diameter becomes so essential. Using the fruit growth rate model by measuring the first round, 15 clusters on 5 trees, 3 days after you spray your petal fall spray, and then again 8 days after the petal fall spray, will give us a view and a clear assessment of how many fruits we have on that tree. Now, it does require you to count the total number of clusters on 5 trees just to know how many the total is, and then we multiply it by the percentages we get out of the model. But let's suppose your target is 100 fruits, and you do a really good job at bloom thinning and petal fall thinning work great, and you end up with only 150 fruits that are growing. You would be just in a perfect position to stop thinning at that point in time. But if you don't get any thinning out of the bloom and little out of your petal fall spray, and you're still ending up with 500 or 600 fruits, it's important to know that before you go into the 12 millimeter. So where things are so variable this year, block to block, and so much flower damage, I think measuring fruit diameter would be worth every penny you paid, especially when you have $1 million riding on this crop and you don't want to figure out with the pollen or the fruit growth rate model exactly what you have. So that's twice I've said how important it is to measure fruitlet diameters. Let's go to the next to the last slide and just summarize. The
Quick
king
question,
flower
if you
damage
don't
that happens.
mind.
Yes.
No tree row volume for NAA applications any longer?
Oh, yes. We use tree row volume on those too. I should have put that on that line. So what I'm recommending is 7.5 parts. That's 3 ounces. It's the same. That's a dilute tree row volume recommendation. So on a full tall spindle, there'd be a full 6 ounces to the acre. The only thing we don't really concentrate in thinners are the surfactants, like LI 700, Regulate, or later if you're at 18 millimeters and you're putting oil with it. We don't concentrate that, but we concentrate the NAA or Maxell and the 7. I could go into a whole discussion on the 7, but let me just leave it at that. We're taking too long. I think it's essential that you assess each block because of the king flower damage. And where most kings are missing, I think it justifies lower rates. But don't be afraid to put on a petal fall spray since it's very safe. Just go on Saturday, and if you want to put a lower dose on, that's fine, but don't skip it. However, if most kings are present, utilize the heat of tomorrow and Friday and get great thinning. Apply your petal fall spray somewhere around 100. It could be 90-degree days or 100 or 110, 125, doesn't matter. But it's critical to assess the response measuring fruitlet diameters, and then we'll decide together whether we apply another spray at 12 millimeters at the 200-degree days in about a week. So if you spray Thursday or Friday, about a week from then is when we'll be looking to spray our normal thinning spray. And then we reassess again with the fruit growth rate model and determine a week later whether we need to spray at 18 to 20 millimeters. I repeat the provisions I said earlier where there's been frost damage. Don't apply any thinners to the bottom of the tree. They'll probably thin just fine with the light dose that they get from what drifts down. And this is a year when I would suggest, even if you've used surfactants in the past, don't use them this year. It's just a little more risky to use regulator oil on a year with frost. I think that's okay. How do you know if you did a good job with bloom and petal fall sprays? I said I was repeated 3 times as my 3rd time. Measure fruit dates 3 days after petal fall application and 8 days after petal fall, and use a fruit growth rate model. And I offer again, send me your data and I'll interpret it for you and give you suggestions within 24 hours. I'd like to open it up for comments, discussion, questions, talking things together, through things together.
Question from Craig Gaveller in Oswego County, switching from apples. Any recommendations for pears?
Oh yes, we should have talked about pears. I was looking at my pear block yesterday and it's set up really well. I haven't seen any pears except mine at Geneva. So let me assume that you've got a really good set of pears. Typically in the past, we've suggested some NAA on pears, but it doesn't work very well. The thing that works best on pears is to wait until the fruitlets are about 12 millimeters and then spray Maxell. Now, it generally takes, with Bartlett, double the dose of Maxell that we use on apples. With Bosc, it takes the same apple rate of 64 ounces per 100. We could talk about other varieties that they almost all respond quite well to Maxell. Now, typically we don't put 7 with it because 7 doesn't do too well on pears. So it's just Maxell alone, but wait until pear size is around 12 millimeters and then it will work quite well.
Question from Jill. Can you go over degree day calculations? What is the base? 38, which we said yes. Is this on newer or Malusim?
This is on Malusim and the carbohydrate model on NUA. So the Malusim basically is just a app that goes to NUA site and asks it, run the carbohydrate model for me and give me the results. So it's all based on the same model that's running on NUA. And that model uses a different degree day calculator than does, if you just look for degree days on NUA, it gives it base 43 or base 40. But over the years, Alan Laxo and I did a number of comparisons of base temperatures, and a lower base temperature for this plant response seemed to fit the data better. Now I'm in the process of trying to make a new degree day. I don't like even the degree day model I'm using, a completely different one that has some plant metabolism response all the way down to 32 degrees. I'm not ready to roll that out yet, but for now, this degree base 38 is the best one, but you only see it when you run the carbohydrate model on the NUA site or the Malusim app.
Recommendation for Ida Reds, Ruby Frost, Empire. So Ida Reds, Ruby Frost, Empire.
Now let's start with Ida Red. I've just seen fabulous and tremendous bloom with Ida Red, and the fruits are already getting big. It's a variety we thin quite easily, and so the data I saw yesterday from the Lake Ontario team showed around 8 millimeters. That's a great time to thin Ida Red if you want to do it early. You can also thin Ida Red by waiting till next week, and then with just 5 parts of NA and a pint of 7, you can thin Ida Reds with 1 shot fairly well. If you want to go this week with the heat, you could still use that same 5 parts and a pint of 7 and do a great job. Empire is a more complicated one because Empire is one of the most frost sensitive varieties. I didn't look at many Empire because there's a lot of them are gone now, but I'm assuming there's a lot of king damage on Empire. And so what we suggest when that's the case, thin at petal fall because it's very safe with 5 parts or 2 ounces of NA and a pint of 7, and then try to assess with the fruit growth rate model where you are with Empire. If it looks like you've got still a lot more apples on the tree than what you need, we'll come back next week with some Maxell and 7. But if not, that might be all you need where you had a lot of damage on Empire Kings and Empire Laterals. I would add, the data I've seen with Empire is all over the board. It's amazing. Some places had a tremendous damage with Empire. Okay, Ruby Frost. So Ruby Frost, we can generally do a fairly good job of thinning that with a petal fall spray of NA-N7. Now, I'm talking about mature trees because as a young tree, we've had experiences of over thinning it, but not generally. But I just want to make sure we're talking mature trees. Then coming back next week with another shot of NA-N7. Those 2 back-to-backs with NA-N7 have done a really good job. So at the first one, we use the lower or Macintosh rate, which is 5 parts or 2 ounces of NA dilute tree row volume and a pint of 7. The second one, it depends on the results of the first one, and with fruit growth measurements, we will then either come back with a high rate of NA, 7.5 parts and 7, or a low rate, 5 parts with 7. Comment on Snapdragon, nobody asked the question, but we're finding it harder and harder to thin. I did put it in my slides. As they get older, you really have to go after it at petal fall and at the 12 millimeter stage.
Another one, do you normally thin mature tall spindle at 100 gallons per acre?
Or less. I think you'd never need to spray them with more than 100 gallons. I think 80 gallons, 75 gallons works great, but their true tree row volume is around 200. And so then you need to adjust accordingly. Let's suppose you're spraying at 75 gallons. To get the right amount of chemical on, you have to use a concentration factor of about 2.5. If you're spraying at 100 gallons, it's a concentration factor of 2, meaning you double the chemical in the water. What's important is the amount that you get on per acre, and not so important is the amount of water. You can spray tall spindle at this stage with 50 gallons and do a great job with thinners. That's a 4x concentration. I tend to like to go 2 to 3x. I don't tend to not like to go 4x. So, you know, a third of 200 would be about 67 gallons. It'd be kind of my minimum, and my upper would be 100 gallons at this stage.
The question, they missed your recommendations on Macintosh. Can you use Maxell on Max at Petal Fall?
Sure you can. It's worked well, but we've also tended to do fairly well with NaN7 on Max, and we've always just sort of been cost conscious. In the reality, the cost is not that big a deal when you're talking about the impact on pack out, but it will work beautiful on Macintosh at a lower rate. So for example, with Gala, we recommend 64 ounces of Maxell at Petal Fall at tree row volume dilute basis. For Max, we recommend 48 ounces of Maxell dilute tree row volume basis. So on a 2x, 200 gallon block with the Galas, you'll be putting on a whole gallon to the acre, whereas on the Max, you'll be putting on 2 times 48, which is 96 ounces.
What happens to tree volume when you have those 2D system plantings or when you do hedging?
It certainly reduces the tree row volume. I measure tree row volumes on hedged tall spindles that are closer to 150 than 200. And then you simply, if you were spraying 100 gallons, you'd times it by 1.5. Or if you were spraying in, you know, what's half of 150? If you're spraying 75, then it'd be a 2x. So it definitely pays to actually measure the trees.
The others
Some of the super spindle blocks that are really 2D, they're even less than 150 at maturity.
Another question, for traditional planting semi-dwarf trees, would a 300-gallon tree row volume make sense? Traditional semi-dwarf.
I'll just be blunt, no. I think it just concentrates too much the chemical. So what we've done is we've said, you know, 200 is about the maximum size, even for semi-dwarf. Now, if you go to traditional processing blocks that are big, 20 by 20 mushroom-shaped trees, those probably do need a 300-gallon dilute volume basis. But semi-dwarfs, central leader types things, just put them at 200 maximum. So that, you know, whatever volume you end up spraying, suppose you're spraying 100 gallons, you just 2x it on those semi-dwarfs. They might measure out in reality to be 225, 250, maybe some even 275. They very rarely measure out at 300 unless they're really huge semi-dwarfs. But most semi-dwarfs are going to be at the 225, 250, and we just cut it off at 200. They're 200 gallons.
Thank you, Terence.
Terence, why in some moment, I know the blossom thinning already went in the region, but why you were saying that with the hot temperatures, we should have come back, and in reality, the growers who did blossom thinning spray one time because everything came so fast. In a few cases, I had a grower who spray until 3 times ATS or 2 times ATS. But what was the situation with the hot temperature? What we should be doing during the weekend to improve the efficiency? We also had rain, a little bit of rain on Sunday morning after ATS spray that went at 6 a.m. What should be, how can we improve the ATS program? And also, I would like to mention that some growers get confused and they were following the pollen 2-grow model trying to spray at 100%. I don't think so. They got the main method that we were planning to use at 60% because we use ATS instead of lime, sulfur.
I'm not sure what happened. It's going to take some thinking and some looking to see really what happened. My guess at this moment is that blossoms opened up so quickly that we got to the target number of blossoms before we really thought we did. And we were off by a few hours when we started the model. And then when we actually sprayed, we were off by a few more hours. And so by the time we got the chemical on there, the pollen tubes had already grown past what ATS could do. If we'd been able to use lime sulfur, we probably would have had a slightly better result. But I think that this kind of year with these temperatures, just a matter of an hour, enough more flowers open and bees were flying, that too many got fertilized before we could get any affected with ATS. Just being a few hours late caused the difference.
Yeah, because already this morning growers were sharing the pictures with clusters of yellow honeycrisp treated with ATS, and they were not seeing the separation as today, this morning, was some kind of discussion. Some of them, they were kind of disappointed in some way by the effort. So just trying to, I know we cannot do anything at this moment, but, and my second question is to encourage growers, even if they didn't put a blossom thinning, or even if they're not gonna do anything, a petal fall, still the effort of fruit growth measurements is a valid option, and it's something that we should be trying to collect with the industry, or no?
Absolutely. You really get a stronger objective measure of how many fruits are growing on that tree. You have to try to knock off with one of the thinning sprays or several thinning sprays. If the frost damage did largely the work for you, then maybe it's not as bad as you think. The other thing that I want to restate is the temperatures we've experienced. We have just lived and are living a natural thinning event. When you have daily deficits of -90, the tree will shed some fruits just because it can't support them all. The extent of that natural thinning, we don't know yet, but we'll pick it up by measuring fruits 3 or 4 days from now and then 8 days from now. So that's another reason we'll be able to assess how much natural thinning we got from this heat wave.
I want to extend my help if anybody needs help with the fruit growth model, measuring fruits, using the Malusim app. Not in Orleans County, I can certainly come out to the farm at the comfortable social distance and show you how it's done. I think it works really, really, really well. Any others? Terence has been on a long time and we appreciate it. I just want to test this webinar format because this is new for me, folks. So I'm going to pick on Polly and I'm going to click allow her to talk. It does not show me that she's unmuted, but if Polly, if you want to say, test your audio now, I just clicked allow to talk. Are you there, Polly?
Yes, I'm here.
Yes, I can hear you.
Hi,
Apologies to
Terry.
Jill and
Thank you.
others. I click on unmute and it doesn't do anything, but apparently it extends the invitation to you guys. I want to
Hi,
thank
Pollyanna. This is Terence.
Hi, Terence. I'm
We
listening
miss
to
you in Geneva. Come
we
back.
miss you in New York.
I miss you guys too.
I want to again extend a thanks to Val.
I'm sorry.
I want to extend another thanks to Polly, Greg Clark, Jim Wargo, and Mike Keller at Valent for supporting us in this webinar. And our next one, I am going to share an announcement. That is, if I can find it. Bear with me, folks. We have our virtual, so on Friday, I don't have it up on the screen, but on Friday at the same time at noon, it's gonna be a little bit longer from 12 to 1:30, we're gonna have what we're calling our virtual petal fall thinning meeting part 2. So that is the one we've traditionally had in the field for the last umpteen years, in which we're gonna get pest management updates from Art and Yellow. They're gonna be brief, about 5 minutes each. So from Art and Yellow, Kerrick Cox, Awas Khan, Julie Carroll, there's gonna be a pollination update from Maria Van Dyke at Cornell. There's going to be a crop update. There's going to be a labor update by either Paul Baker or somebody at Ag Affiliates. So we're going to attempt to do what we did in the field the last many years, but in a condensed kind of hour-and-a-half format. Mario will be available to answer any thinning questions as well off the cuff there, but we're going to kind of cover the areas that normally we didn't cover today with traditional petal fall, with pest management, crop update, and labor update. Mark Wiltberger on our team will also give you some information about the Forward New York with the COVID. Anything else, folks? I think one more quick question, if you're okay with it, Terence. If I'm worried about russeted fruit from cold damage, is it worth putting on GA4 or GA7 at petal fall? If so, how will this change my thinning ideas?
So if you had some frost damage, you probably get russeting that you can't control with GAs. GAs work well when the cells that produce the wax on the subepidermal level are not damaged. If they've been damaged by frost, we can't control russeting very well. I think it's still worth the effort to try. It does reduce it somewhat, but on years where we've had frost damage induced russet, we can't control it. It does impact your thinning decision because it makes thinning easier. If you put Provide on Golden Delicious, they thin easier. If you put Provide on Sweet Tango, they thin easier. And so a regular Provide program that starts at petal fall and then 2 sprays after that at first cover and second cover will make the thinning easier, and I would reduce the rates of thinners by about 30%, 25–30%.
Thank you, Terence. Greatly appreciated. Thank you for your time, everybody. Got a lot of thank yous as well for the information, Terence.
Okay, you're welcome. Have a good day.